the top female professions that cheat from a female divorce lawyer. Let's just play this and get right into it.
Which female professions are most likely to cheat? I'm going to give the top 2 spots to women who are the breadwinners, income earners, more likely to cheat. Beyond that, we have singers or entertainers, flight attendants, and these ladies who are social media influencers, getting too popular online.
She kind of looks like Phoebe Buffay from Friends, if you guys remember that show. All right, so at the top of the list, we have women that are the breadwinners in the household. And, it's interesting because I've been saying this for years, and people always push back on me. Oh, Rich, that's not true. Where's your source? Where's your evidence? I'm like, I've talked to enough people on consults that I know that it exists. But here we have now a divorce lawyer whose entire business is divorce, and she recognizes the number one source for her clients cheating on the women's side is being the breadwinner. And what's interesting? There was studies done, and actually women that are college educated, so women with diplomas, framed in mahogany on the wall with little letters after the name saying that they are very important, are more likely to be unhappy in a relationship, marriage, and are more likely to obviously cheat based on her experience as well too. It's interesting that happens, right? Because women, we know, like to look up to a giant. They're hypergamous. They want to look up to a man and be like, this is the best I can do. Everybody else is invisible. This is what the preference is in the model for long-term relationships. It's not always achievable. And because there's so many women out there that have been told to chase excellence, get degrees, climb the corporate ladder, go and do the work, there's a lot of women out there today right now that are in a position where they are actually the breadwinners in the household. We've seen this a lot. In fact, one of the biggest complaints that I heard from gals when I got divorced and started dating that were always divorced, I always asked them, this is something I talked about in my book as well, the Unplugged Alpha. They would always say, it's because he was a deadbeat, he couldn't keep a job, he was incompetent. They just weren't able to look up to this giant that they were expecting to be with, and they felt let down. So what do they start doing? Well, if their husband doesn't look like such an attractive proposition anymore, they start looking around. Maybe Kevin from sales or Steve from the accounting department starts to look interesting. Maybe somebody during travel looks interesting, and lo and behold, they go outside of the relationship of their marriage and, they break their vows. But it is what it is. I've been saying this for years, guys. And again, there's a chapter in my book that talks about human promiscuity and how monogamy is very difficult and unnatural, and we're more or less monogamish, or we are with one person at a time. The thing that you have to understand about women is because of their nature, like I said earlier, they want to be with the giant. They want to look up to you. The ideal scenario is other guys are invisible because she gets up every morning and she looks at you and says, this guy is the shit. Nobody can do better than this guy. I can't do better than this guy. This is the best position that I can absolutely find myself in, my kids in, and all that sort of stuff. Because women routinely do leave marriages if they find or they think that they can do better. If they think that untying the knot will improve their situation, and they will remove their children from their father in the household and what would generally be best for the kids to sort of seek greener pastures. I mean, the truth of the matter is, in most realms of life, the grass is always greener where you water and fertilize it, not where you pick up and go somewhere else, of course. But, you try telling that to somebody whose biological imperative is, this guy's a loser beside me and I want out. So number 1 was the breadwinners in the household. So guys, you want a lasting long-term relationship, you really got to be the breadwinner. The good news on that, actually, before I move on to the second one, is if you do end up not being the breadwinner as a guy, and she does decide to cheat and untie the knot and leave the marriage, in the West, in most family law situations, she's actually the one that's going to get screwed. Because family law is written in such a way that it protects the lower income earner. So in this case, if you're not the breadwinner and she is, and you're maybe a stay-at-home dad or something, and you raise the kids, chances are she's going to be paying you alimony and support. So it ain't all bad from that perspective. So just chuck that up and maybe, mark that as a W instead of an L. The second thing she said, as far as from her practice and experience, was that it was musicians, influencers, these social media influencers, what she called them, and also flight attendants. Isn't that interesting? Flight attendants, eh? I'll deal with the musicians and the influencers in a second, but right up there near the top in the number 2 position, she kind of shared it with all those categories at the same time. I have friends that are actually pilots, and I've asked them, what's it like with flight attendants? Do they live up to the reputation that they have? And the answer is absolutely yes. See, women are generally better at cheating than men are because they have more to lose. Looking promiscuous, looking like a slut, for example, is a term that, other women call other women when they want to sort of disqualify them. Like, there are consequences to promiscuity. And if you travel around as a flight attendant, it's a lot easier to get away with it. So I guess, in marriages, it sounds like from her practice, a lot of her clients that are women that have cheated in the marriage are in that profession. Now, the other one that I thought was quite interesting as well was the influencer, the social media influencer, the musicians, the people with the Instagrams and the TikToks and all that sort of stuff, and they publish content. And I think that social media in general across the board is used very differently by men and women. Men tend to hold the phone up and the camera pointing outwards. Look at this car, look at this bike, look at, this Grand Canyon scenery sort of thing. Whereas women, they more or less tend to point the camera at themselves, using the selfie camera, for those purposes. So they generally use social media to get attention and likes and all that sort of stuff. So you have to be aware of the differences in use. Also, if you're a social media influencer and a musician, you're getting constant attention and validation from other guys. And if you marry a guy and your day is essentially getting likes and attention and comments and validation, and these dudes are sliding in your DM telling you how beautiful you are and how amazing you are, eventually guys with some blue check marks that are verified, that are potentially athletes, other, social media influencers with probably larger followings, politicians, anybody with social influence out there will get her attention, maybe say something interesting and nice, and they might look like a better option than you do. So just keep that in mind if you're thinking about tying the knot and getting married and, exposing yourself to that risk. You definitely want to stay away, from the breadwinners. I mean, the good news is if you do have to untie that knot, you'll probably be okay with alimony and child support if she makes more money than you. But you're going to go through the discomfort and, in some cases and cultures, shame of having to get divorced. And again, if your wife is a social media influencer, musician, flight attendant, in those areas, it makes sense that that would also happen to a high degree as well.
All right, guys, I really hope that you enjoyed that clip. If you want to check out the full-length podcast episode, you can find that right over here. Also, make sure you visit my website over here where you'll find my supplements, the opportunity to book me privately one-on-one for coaching, and most importantly, my new School of Unplugging, which you'll find on the courses tab. Newer to the channel, hit subscribe.